Next is Q Source, who says, in a Greek translation of the Inanna descent myth, would the same word for staked be used as for the crucifixion of the Lord Jesus Christ and Paul?
I mean, yeah. I mean, there. Of course, this is a thing. Like, if you're an author and you're writing something, like, you would just be descriptive, right? So, the word crucifixion or the word crucified didn't exist in the time when the Inanna myth was made, right? So what it says is she was nailed to a post. So if you were translating it directly in Greek, you would just say nailed to a post. Now you would use staros probably for post. So you would have the same cognate, the same root word for crucifixion, but the text doesn't use a verbal form of it. So your translation wouldn't either. I think the better question to ask would be if a Greek, it was translating that text, and you were having a conversation with that translator, and you say, oh, so she was crucified, and you use the Greek word for it. And you would say, oh, yeah, it's just not said here, but I'm going to say nailed to a post. But you're right, that what that describes is a crucifixion using that word. Like, they would agree that the words mean the same thing. And yeah, they wouldn't dispute with you about, like, well, she was killed before she was nailed up, so that's not a crucifixion. They would never argue that because that distinction didn't exist back then. At all. And so, and I cite, like I said, multiple scholars who make this point that the word never meant anything that specific. It never meant killed on the cross. It always meant just put on a cross, whether you were killed before, whether you were killed after, whether you survived, didn't matter. If you were like stuck on a stake, if you were staked, regardless of when, how, etc., you were crucified. That's all the word meant, right? It didn't have any other fine-tuned distinctions like that. That's modern apologetics. It didn't exist in the ancient language. And hopefully that's the question. But.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it did. But I've noticed that there's a lot of apologists out there, not necessarily only apologists, but a lot of people try to make the hyper-specific claim of, well, does it say Roman crucifixion?
Yeah. Right.
and they try to be hyper specific about the type of crucifixion when, like you said, that distinction just didn't exist.
Yeah. And all of these apologetic distinctions didn't exist. This is a common apologetic tactic, is to take a word, define it hyper specifically so that you can get rid of all the parallels, right? So you say, like, resurrection has to be resurrection of the flesh that died. There's no other thing can be called a resurrection. No other coming back from the dead can be called a resurrection. And then, of course, once they do that, you point out that, well, actually, Paul says that the flesh that died stays in the grave, and that you get resurrected in a new body. And then they go, no, that can't be. And I'm like, but that's what he says, right? So what they'll do is they'll try to make a hyper-specific definition, and then, therefore, Osiris wasn't resurrected because of some weird hyper-specific thing, like, well, Jesus wasn't dismembered and put back together and brought back to life. Therefore, Jesus, it's not the same. Jesus and Osiris. Right. Osiris wasn't resurrected because resurrection can't involve dismemberment, right? Like, it's that kind of stupid hyper-specificity that doesn't exist in the ancient concepts or language, that is a modern invention. And there's even scholars who've tried to make messianism, Jewish messianism, go away by getting super hyper-specific to the definition of Messiah, so that all the messiahs that even Bart Ehrman was talking about don't exist. They're not messiahs, and there's no messianism. There's no messianism before Christianity because they hyper-specifically define it. Now, this is all word games. This is semantics. You can't change what things are by changing what you call them. So this is entirely an apologetic tactic. It has no legitimate scholarly purpose and doesn't track reality. So you have to be on your eye for these, like, attempt to hyper-specific define something that isn't the way the word was, that it wasn't defined that specifically, in order to make all the parallels go away. And that's a common device. So be on your alert for that.